Mississippi is breaking new ground for business at a historic pace. Amazon, XAI, Toyota, Milwaukee Tool, and GE Aerospace have all tapped into our deep talent pool, prime geographic location, and welcoming communities. This is bigger than megasites. Mississippi offers a thriving business ecosystem with affordability, greater collaboration with energy partners, and record-breaking speed to market. Looking to expand? Break new ground at mississippi.org.
On today's episode of Parenting Great Kids.
So she had 6 hospitalizations over her short 10 and a half months on this earth. And on the 6th hospitalization, her heart rate just went out and they tried to revive her, but they couldn't.
Welcome to Parenting Great Kids. Here's your host, Dr. Meg Meeker.
Today we're joined by Christina Bernardo, co-founder of Avocado Health. Christina is a certified executive coach, former federal appointee, and a mom whose personal tragedy inspired a mission to help parents feel more confident when navigating their children's health. After losing her daughter, Aviva, following multiple unexplained hospitalizations, Christina and her husband created Avocado Health to support families facing uncertainty and difficult medical decisions. Today, we'll talk about parenting, trust, grief, resilience, and why confidence matters more than perfection. Christina, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Well, you have quite a story. You're a Cuban-American mother, as an executive coach, a federal appointee, and the co-founder of Avocado Health. Tell us about your story, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, I think probably most importantly, I am the mother of 5 children. And as you mentioned, actually, Cuban-American family, I'm the baby of 10 children. So
Wow.
con la beba in Spanish. So my whole life, I'm beba or la beba. And so kind of being around kids, helping raise kids has always been a big part of my story. And I think even from our first child, my husband and I are both entrepreneurial. You know, I had a lot of postpartum anxiety afterwards, and I didn't know what it was. And I didn't know anything was wrong and didn't actually realize that I needed to get any help for it until 3 years into being a parent.
Oh my.
Yes, exactly. Because you
Did your obstetrician or pediatrician sort of ask you questions, or did you just assume your anxiety was normal?
Well, they ask questions about postpartum depression, right? They gave me the questionnaire and I said, "Oh, I don't have that. I'm not feeling any of these symptoms." So I just assumed what I was feeling was normal.
Uh-huh.
And in my case, it was just kind of like constant thoughts trying to navigate kind of how to be a present mother and also how to have like a career that meant a lot to me, and just kind of these thoughts that would go loop endlessly,
Oh,
and really didn't notice. And finally, after it was about 9 months after having my second child that I was like, this probably can't be normal. Like,
right, right.
my friends aren't experiencing this when I talk to them. And that's when that time from when you realize something's wrong to getting help,
Yes.
so many months, because then it feels so overwhelming. Like, how do I find a therapist? Are they on my plan? Do they work with moms? All of those questions. So
Yeah.
even from identifying something was wrong, it took me about 6 months to get the
Mm.
help I needed. And then from then on, I've continued having a therapist through all my pregnancies. And thankfully, before our third child, so our third child, Aviva Lilia, was born full term, healthy, lovely baby. And thankfully, I'd gotten a therapist right before because I knew what might be coming. And yeah, on her 9th day of life, she just woke up from a 4-hour nap, 3 or 4 hour nap, and was still tired and
Mm.
didn't want to nurse. And,
Mm.
I knew as a kind of experienced mother, I said, wait, you just slept for all these time. You should want to like nurse right away. Like you should have been
Right.
trying to nurse kind of like in the middle of your sleep cycle. And so I said, okay, that's strange. Why doesn't she want to nurse? And then I just happened to like touch her nose and notice it was cold. And I
Oh.
said, huh, that's strange. Like maybe we should take her temperature. And very luckily, we had from when they released us from the hospital, I had this document right next to my bed that said that a high temperature is very dangerous, but also a low temperature is very dangerous. And I
Mhm.
didn't know that. I'm not a doctor. And I always said, "Oh my goodness, well, her temperature is quite low. This sounds like it could be dangerous." And then, with the tremendous privilege we had, our next door neighbor was an ER doctor.
Wow.
Yes. And she was an ER doctor that worked part-time because she had 3 little kids she was also raising. So she was
Mhm.
home, right?
Mm.
Because how many times do you have a doctor friend or family member, but they're working 80, 90-hour weeks? You can't get a hold of them. They don't answer a call or a text. And so we were really lucky, and Appa came over and, she looked at Aviva, she took all of her vitals, and she said, "You know what, Christina, like, I think she might be okay, but I would just say take her to the ER just in case."
Right.
And she even called ahead to the ER, let him know that Aviva was coming. And, as it turned out, even like momentarily, her heart stopped during that first 9-day visit. And at
Mm.
first, they were going to transfer us to a different hospital, to the children's hospital. And then they said, no, we're going to put her back in the NICU here and treat her. And we spent several days there, some of the hardest days of my life,
Yeah.
obviously, and they had no answers. No answers. They did every test under the moon. Every test, every specialty came to see us, cardiology, neurology, everybody did every possible test. And, even the doctor, oh, she was so lovely. And she was about my age. And she's like, I have a 2-year-old. And she was like in near tears. She was like, I can imagine that like leaving the hospital with no answer must be one of the hardest things in the world. And so, and we were grateful. Like, we thought, okay, it's just one hospitalization. She bounced back so quickly, and we weren't too worried, but it ended up happening multiple times. And kind of every time we thought everything was fine, a few months later, she would get sick again. And I know you're a doctor, so she would kind of present with these same symptoms of lethargy, just being like very tired, um, having a slow heart rate, then that would lead to like trouble breathing, um, and a cold body temperature was often one of the symptoms, and all of those are actually controlled by the brainstem.
Mhm.
So, kind of where we were left, and so she had 6 hospitalizations over her short 10 and a half months on this earth,
Wow.
and on the 6th hospitalization, her heart rate just went out, and they tried to revive her, but they couldn't. And, yeah, we were left spinning. I mean, no
Oh.
one in our entire journey had ever prepared us she could die. Nobody. So it really came out of nowhere. And literally, she had just seen her pediatrician 2 days before, and she was like, "She looks great." She was standing up. She's starting to walk. Like, she was meeting all of her milestones. So
Mhm.
no one could understand what was going on. Everybody was so confused.
Mhm.
Um, and I bring all of that up because that was a big motivator for us behind Avocado Health and what we started, and just realizing that there are so many questions that we have as parents. Right?
Mhm.
There's so many. It's endless, especially when you have your first baby and you're just kind of nervous all the time. Like, are they breathing? Can they sleep on their belly or their back? Do I have to roll them over? Like, why aren't they latching? Are they getting enough milk? Are they gaining enough weight? Like, there's so
I
many
would tell
questions.
you, if you weren't anxious before having a child, being a mother really makes you anxious. And here you are with a baseline of anxiety, and now you have this beautiful child who has these illnesses that nobody can figure out. And I will say, I worked in a busy children's hospital. I've been doing this a long time. Your daughter's illness was, I don't want to say rare, but it's rare,
Yeah.
where you go through all the tests that she had and you're left empty. And the frustration for you with the medical community, with everything must have been very intense.
Oh goodness, it was so hard, and I think my husband took that harder. Like
Uh-huh.
he really felt like, I think in some ways he still feels like the doctors may have done something wrong and giving her medicine too late, too much, that made her heart go out. I was a little less questioning. I just didn't grow up like questioning the doctors, and I was more like what you were saying there is I kept saying like, this is just so rare that no one understands it. The doctors don't know. And literally every single doctor would tell us something different, literally.
Uh-huh.
And we would say like, oh, well, we heard this one doctor thinks that, it's carbon monoxide. Um, and then the doctor would be like, "Oh, I don't think that. No, I disagree with that." And I'm like, "Okay."
Oh,
So
somebody straighten this out.
yeah.
But it sounds like you saw a lot of doctors.
Oh,
So,
a lot.
when you see that many and that many
Yeah.
specialists, this is something rare because,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, doctors can certainly mess up, but when you've seen that many, you hope that just one of them can break through, and it sounds like they were good. Um,
Yes.
so after your daughter passed, I'm sure you felt worse, and did you feel a lot of guilt?
Oh my gosh. The guilt cycle is
Mm.
so horrific, for losing a child. Eh, any child, I think maybe parents too, partners, the guilt cycle for loss is so intense, and I think the what ifs, the whys, for us, the last day she got sick, it actually presented very differently. So
Huh,
she started throwing up. And
huh,
so we thought, "Oh, well, she just has a stomach bug." So we weren't that concerned. Um, and I even like texted I was running an organization then, and I texted my team saying like, "Oh, we're going to hospital, but don't worry. It's different symptoms. She's just throwing up, or, we think it's okay. It's just a stomach bug." And so originally we just went to the urgent care.
huh.
And then, like, they started giving her medicine for, a stomach bug, and then her heart rate started dropping, and then we went in an ambulance to the ER. So that part of it that we didn't straight go to the ER
Mhm.
was one of the hardest things for me. That was where a lot of that, "What if we had just gone to the ER? What if would they have found it?" And that took, I will be honest, that took probably several years to get over the what ifs. What if we came to San Diego, and because one of the best specialists, so we were left with like mitochondrial. Everyone said, okay, maybe it's mitochondrial. That's kind of what we're left with. And the
Mhm,
best mitochondrial specialist is actually based here in San Diego. So
mhm,
part of the reason I came here was to try to get a meeting with him. Now, unfortunately, we weren't able to meet with him until 6 months after we lost Aviva,
mhm,
because he is so full, like, people come from all over the world to see him.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
But when we met with him, he thankfully, I mean, he spent, like, 2 hours reviewing her records, and he was like, "I am so sorry. Like, I know you all came here for an answer, but I have reviewed her records, and nothing I see lines up with, like, what I see in my babies who have mitochondrial disorders. Like, all of her numbers are different." He's like, "I just don't think this is mitochondrial." And he said, and I was pregnant at the time with our rainbow baby, Liliana, and he said, "And it's probably better because if it were mitochondrial, it could be genetic, and keep an eye on that." And then,
Oh,
we had
what a task. What a task. Mom, keep an eye on brainstem diseases. But Christina, listening to your story, it sounds like you're an extraordinary mother.
Mm.
You did everything above and beyond what a parent can do, and it just was. It just happened, and I think not
Yeah,
having answers when you've been through that kind of pain
yeah.
can be extremely hard, but I hope for you, you can let yourself off the hook.
Mm. Well, yes. Now, I mean, taken time. I hate to say that time heals all wounds. I don't think that's true. I think you really have to immerse yourself in the grief and get the support you need. But for me, it was really, I think the what ifs, the whys are just part of the process. And when I have
Yeah,
friends who lose children and they lose a baby, I'm like, this is just, I wish I could rush you through this. I wish I could just tell you, don't forget about the what ifs. But I can't rush anyone through that. It is part of the grief process that we all have to go through. But for me, what really helped was I just started to really feel like I could hear Aviva, like I could hear her voice in my head, that I could, and I still feel that. I still feel like she has this calm, soothing other energy, whatever folks like to call it. And I would just hear her being like, when I started to go down those rabbit holes of what if I had taken you to the hospital sooner, and what if we had found a local pediatrician sooner, and what if, and I would hear her say, "Mommy, it's okay. It's
it
okay,
is
baby."
okay.
Yeah.
It is okay.
Yeah.
It
You
is
did everything
okay.
you could.
Yep.
Thank you.
You've done everything you could, and And from my experience with children dying and they move on, it really is okay. And accepting that is really
Yeah.
tough, that your child is okay now,
Yeah.
because I do believe in heaven.
Yeah.
But going past that, what was the biggest thing that helped you through all of that grief?
That's a great question. I always say this, and I tell people who have experienced a loss that writing saved my life.
Mm.
I really believe it. Kind of always had this inclination towards writing, and I think it doesn't have to be writing. It's some form of, one of my favorite therapists, Dr. Edith Eger, who is also a Holocaust survivor. She said the opposite of depression is expression.
Wow, that's great. Yeah.
Yes, I love that line. So I think any way you can express yourself, whether that, I had one friend who lost a baby who started painting.
Mm.
I've had people who, run marathons or just something, a way you can express yourself. Play music, art therapy is huge. I wrote a song for Aviva, and I've never considered myself very musical, but writing that, I come from a musical family, writing it and recording it with my brother was just like very therapeutic for me. But for me, my form of expression was writing, and I would just literally I would sit down every day, once the other big kids went to school, and I'd start writing on my phone. And then the irony
Wonderful.
of it all was I thought I was going to be processing my grief for Aviva, but actually what came out was all the grief about losing my mother from,
Oh,
10 years
wow.
there.
Mhm.
Yes, and then my mother had major mental health issues, so she didn't actually raise us. My father did. And so I was processing all that grief around not only, physically losing my mother when she died, but losing the idea of a mother, like having that present mother. Um, so yeah, it was very interesting. I'm sitting here trying to process Aviva's grief, and then I'm processing grief for my mother.
Grief
And
does
I think
tend
it
to
was
dou
that.
grief, yeah, grief doubles up.
Yes, yes, yes,
One
complex
grief
grief.
brings on
Yes,
another grief, and it
yes,
makes it even more painful, but it makes the doorway for healing that
yes.
much bigger.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think looking back now, because eventually I did get to writing about Aviva too, and it would just depend on the day, and I would actually go to her place of resting. I was on this beautiful hill in San Diego, and I would just write for hours, but I think what was happening is that my brain wasn't quite ready to process the loss of Aviva. So where it could go was processing the loss of my mom. And
Yeah.
that was very healing in and of itself. And I had this moment where people would tell me, oh, like Aviva's with your mom in heaven. And I'd be like, what? They'll tell me that. That's not helpful.
That doesn't help. I
That
wanna
doesn't help
hear.
me. I wanna picture her with my grandfather or something, with my abuelo,
Sure,
but
yeah.
that's when I realized, like, I need to heal this so that if someone tells me that Aviva's with my mother, like, that it feels good. And so that was, like, I think part of the process for me, and, at one point later, I did have a dream that my mother was, like, taking care of me and taking care of her, and I was like, "Okay, this is finally kind of healed for me." So I always tell folks when, I do love talking to other parents who are going through this. And if anyone's listening, please feel free to email me and you've been through this. And one thing I always tell them is like, we have like, look, just think of some form of expression, like whatever that may be for you.
I think that's great. It's almost like, taking the grief and letting it out
Yeah.
through a paintbrush or through a pen. And
Yes.
and I think that's very, very wise counsel. So what would you say to friends who are trying to help someone like you or another friend through grief? What should they say? What
Right.
should they not say?
That's a very good one. I've written a lot about this too. Um, what we always say, and I will say that my friends were pretty amazing. They were pretty lovely. Many of them are therapists, so that helps. They kind of know. One of my best friend in life is a nurse that works with folks with cancer, so she's been through the whole kind of death and dying process. My friends were great. My family was great. My husband really suffered, and that men often don't process grief as well and talking about grief. So like
Right.
three of his best men from his wedding never called. They never
Oh,
emailed, they never texted. They sent checks, which was really kind. But we didn't hear from them. I would hear from their wives or their partners, but not them. And that's been really hard. And still to this day, he hasn't reconnected with some of them. So I bring that up because the first thing I say is just show up. Like physically is ideal, and it was so hard for us because we lost Aviva during COVID. So
Oh,
my best friends couldn't even come.
they couldn't come.
They couldn't come. Two of their parents were immunocompromised, so they really couldn't fly. It was before the vaccine. So everything, like, they couldn't come. So that was really hard for me. I only had one friend show up, and he was kind of like, didn't really believe in COVID or vaccines. So he was just like, I'll be there. And I will always remember that he was here. Like, he will always be a special person in my soul. And some of my cousins came from far away because they felt it was important. But that was one thing I had to navigate with my best friends is like, I understand you couldn't physically come, but I want you to understand how hard that was for me, that you couldn't physically show up. And how that might be a wound that might be really hard to heal. And thankfully, what they did is the following year, after her 1 year angel anniversary, they all flew out here and we did a ceremony, and
Oh,
it was
wonderful.
beautiful. I mean, they're wonderful friends, but that's the first thing I tell people: if you can physically show up, show up. Because a lot of people go through that. Oh, well, like, my cousin just died, and I'm not sure if I should go. Blah blah blah. And like, go,
Go.
just go.
Knock on the door.
Just
be
go.
there.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can physically be there, if you can afford it, if you can take off time and work, go. If you can't, call. Call, text. Even if they don't answer, they probably will not. They may never answer your text message, but I promise you they will remember every single person who texted them or called. I will still remember every single person who called or texted. I didn't respond to almost any of them. And then sometimes, one time, an old coworker called, and her number popped up on my phone, and I was like, I'm going to answer this. I don't know why. There was something about it, and I answered it, and it was like the best conversation I ever had because she had recently lost her mother, and we were just talking about grief.
If you've ever dealt with a congested baby, you know how quickly it can turn into a stressful situation. No sleep, no feeding, just a very unhappy little one. That's why more pediatricians are recommending using a nasal aspirator before every feed and every sleep. But not all aspirators are created equal. Boogie Buster was designed by parents who were frustrated with everything else on the market. It's powerful enough to actually clear congestion, but gentle and safe for your baby. Parents love how easy and hygienic it is. And in testing with nearly 700 families, it received 5 out of 5 stars across the board. Even healthcare professionals chose it over other nasal care options. It's one of those small tools that makes a big difference in your daily routine, helping your baby breathe easier and keeping everyone a little calmer. Now, for a limited time, you can get 25% off baby nasal aspirators at boogiebuster.com. Plus, Parenting Great Kids listeners get an additional 20% off when you use code Dr. Meg. That's a total of 45% off. So head on over to boogiebuster.com. That's BOOGIE Buster.com. Get your kiddo a Boogie Buster before the sale ends, and remember to use code Dr. Meg, that's DRMEG, for an additional 20% off.
Finn. Processing grief. So I always say, show up, whether that's physically or via text or call.
How in the world, after going through so much grief and so much pain, did you have it in you to start a company? And why did you start the company?
That is a very good question. I think for the first year, I was really kind of just immersed in the grief and the grieving process. And, I'm a very intellectual griever, as my therapist would say. So I kind of read every book about grief and wrote. And for me, where I kept landing was even before I lost Aviva, I was leading all these workshops around women's leadership, and I was coaching women leaders. And I would have a big focus on confidence building. And where I was left was I kept thinking, gosh, like, when you lose someone, it makes death really kind of feel like it's on the surface, right? That it could be right around the corner for all of us.
For
And
everybody.
yeah, for everybody and for everyone you love. And I just kept thinking like, wow, like, if I could die, tomorrow, like I can get in a car accident tomorrow. And that did happen. My nephew got in a car accident 30 days after losing Aviva and
Mm.
nearly died himself. His girlfriend died at only
Oh,
31. And he went through, 20 surgeries. He was in the hospital for months. He survived. He's thriving. But going through that, it was just, we had one medical illness and then one, tragic accident. And
mhm.
you realize just how life
It's
can
very
go so
fragile.
quickly. It's so fragile. It's
Very fragile, and we don't appreciate that
yes,
because we
yes,
feel very confident. Oh,
yes,
tomorrow this and tomorrow that, but in a moment, in a breath,
yes.
and that's very, very hard. So, what was it
Mhm.
in your heart and in
Yeah,
your soul that
yeah,
said, "We need to move
yeah,
forward, and here's where I'm going to go, and here's why"?
yeah. And well, what it made me realize was I kept thinking to myself, like, we could literally die tomorrow. I could die tomorrow. And so many of the women I know, including myself, we're so hard on ourselves.
Oh, oh, we're our own worst enemy.
Yes.
Terrible. Mhm.
Yes. And I
Our
said,
brain,
like,
our brain can be a prison. Yeah.
oh my God, absolutely. And I said to myself, like, if I could die tomorrow, would I think to myself, like, I'm so glad I was mean to myself my whole life? Like, it was so worth it. Or we would be like, goodness, I wish I were just kinder to myself. I wish I believed in my dreams. I wish I thought that I could work for the UN. I wish I had gone for, that opportunity. And I wish I thought I was a better mother, right? Like, I wish I believed that I was doing a good job. And so many of the women I were working with were also mothers and trying to navigate this world of having so many identities and working, whether from home or outside the home. And being so hard on themselves. So I that's when I really stepped into the executive, coaching and the leadership and working with women, who, like myself, had all of these, self-doubt and feeling, I always joke that when I became a mother, it was just like one more thing I was bad at that I put on the list. Like, "Oh, and now I'm a bad mother," right?
Right.
And
And then isn't it odd how our mind goes there? It's like default.
Yes.
Default, beat yourself up.
Yes,
Default, you didn't
exactly.
do this right. And for you, that must
Yeah.
have been very, very
Oh,
intense. So
yes.
so then you started
Yeah,
coaching women, you
yeah,
started coaching business women,
yeah,
executive
yeah.
mothers.
Yes, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of moms navigating and starting their own businesses. And, I just kept thinking, how do we make this easier on mothers? And how do we combine this idea of giving parents, you know, easy access to information at their fingertips in the moments that matter the most with the kind of support of a coach at scale, right? How do we implement that? And that's when we came up with this idea of kind of a parent coach in your pocket where we can answer all those questions. We had so many questions about Aviva that we just couldn't answer.
Couldn't
And I know that, she is a rare case, like we said. I know I'm not naive. Avocado Health couldn't have saved Aviva, but I do know that if you text Avocado Health today and say, my 9-day-old baby just woke up and doesn't want a nurse and has a
Mhm.
temperature of 95.8 degrees, what do I do? It would say, this is an emergency and go to the ER.
Yeah,
Right? And
great.
that's
So
what we needed to hear.
Avocado Health is a place
Mhm.
where any parent, particularly struggling parents or hurting parent, can go to and immediately get an answer from someone or help
What
even if there's no answer, but help from someone.
Well, and it's from like a database of resources that have been all hand selected by clinicians. So it's essentially like if someone came to your office and said, what are the first foods I would feed my baby? You would likely send them to a trusted website like AAP or, Mayo Clinic or Nemours, and they would find that information. So essentially what we've done is we've created our own small language model that only pulls from the most evidence-based resources.
Great.
Exactly. So you're not getting any parenting blogs, you're not getting any Facebook posts, you're not getting any Reddit discussions, you're not getting any of the judgment out there. You're essentially getting where your pediatrician or your psychologist or, your speech therapist, where they would send you for information.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it's 24/7. Parents can ask any question they want. And then we also kind of infer the question behind the question. So if you're
Mm,
saying like, "Oh, my child's almost 2 years old and she's not walking, should I be worried?" We know you are worried, and you're worried it might be a developmental delay. So it answers that question very empathetically. It pulls from the best resources. It will list 2 resources, like where you can find more information, and then it will bring in the early childhood intervention centers nearest you with the phone number right there. Call. If
right
you're
there.
concerned, you can call here. And then similarly, like I experienced, I'm having all this anxious thoughts, having a baby, is this normal? You get this kind, empathetic answer, 2 resources, and then it will pull up the behavioral health specialist in your area, and you can just call right
Ah,
there.
excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So
So
you're
when did you start Avocado Health?
yeah. So almost immediately after losing Aviva, my husband pivoted to the
Mm,
developmental health space. He really, I had the big joke with me and my husband is that ever since he married me, his income has just been going lower and lower and lower.
well, you're an entrepreneur. That's what happens. Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
'cause
yeah.
he started off in the financial world, and I was always like, "How do you have more impact? How do you have more impact?" Because I've always been impact driven, and so always veering more and more towards impact. And so he immediately, like when he was holding Aviva in those last moments, because we did have some time with her, he said, "Aviva, I don't know what happened to you, but I'm going to make sure that no other parent has to go through what I've gone through." And he made that commitment and he followed through almost immediately.
Mm,
Um, and oftentimes men, and it's not just men, but there is like action oriented grief, and he was very much action oriented grief. Oftentimes men are action oriented grievers. I was not. And so he immediately went into action mode, and for him that was pivoting from kind of like the financial space, the financial markets, to developmental health, and had worked on an app that was also an award-winning app that helped parents track their development of their child. But apps are very difficult. It's hard to get folks to download apps, even if unless you're the best app in the world, it's very hard to get folks to download apps. And then even you lose 70% of them when you ask them to download. And then
right.
even if they do download, the chances they'll go back are so low. So engagement is very difficult. And even though they had this great app, they just like could not get the engagement.
Hmm.
And I used to tell him, "Could you just text me? Because if you texted me an activity to do with my 2-year-old, I
Right,
will do it.
right.
But if you want me to open up an app, find an activity, rate the activity, I'm never going to do it. I'm too busy."
And people particularly now, they want an answer now. So do you have live staff? How do you have people who can respond in
Mhm.
24 hours or
Yeah. Yeah.
around the clock?
So it's actually what it's doing. It's an AI tool that responds, but from this limited database. So they're pulling from the resources, and then we can answer about 90% of the questions that are asked from our AI database. But if we cannot, we have for those kind of 2% of questions, or if you want one-to-one, we have a whole team of parent coaches and child life specialists that you can speak with, and that can get back to you within 24 hours to answer or if you just want more support, or if you want, every person who signs up gets a one-on-one coaching and can continue that if they'd like. So we have the human level support there. And then what we do is on our end, it's all de-identified data. The second you just become numbers. So we don't know who's asking what, but we can see the types of questions that are being asked. And what we
Mhm.
do with that and that data, which is tremendous, is that we're able to see kind of what are the biggest challenges parents are facing and then develop content around that. So then
Mhm.
we have weekly workshops that touch on all of these things that, parents are having issues with live workshops that are open to everybody, free.
So how
And if
how many how many staff do you have that's
yeah.
going to do, or is it just you? I can't imagine. Having these live calls,
Yeah.
live
Yeah.
seminars, and so forth.
Yes, we have about 10 active, like, child life specialists and parent coaches, and then we have, 10 more that we can bring on depending on demand.
Mhm.
But actually what you find is the reason why we went text-based is folks feel more comfortable texting. Like, even when you have
Okay.
the calling option, they really most people, especially we work with a lot of younger moms, they feel more comfortable texting.
Yeah. Isn't that
And
isn't yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? I think
yeah,
that's a generational thing. They've kind of
yeah,
been trained, but that's
yeah,
exactly what I feel. So we don't have much more time, Christina, but
yeah.
this is just amazing. I would love another hour or two. Why avocado health? Where's
Yeah.
the name come from?
Oh, great question. Well, Aviva Health was taken.
Oh, yeah.
So in some ways, it's a play off of Aviva Avocado. But it really is kind of a play on words, this idea of advocate, that we're encouraging parents to be the best advocate for their children. We do believe that parents know their children the best, right? We
They
all
do.
know. We know when the doctor's telling us something and we're like, no, that's not it. That's not right. That is, I can feel in my gut that that's not what's going on here.
And I have done some teaching, and I think it's extremely important for pediatricians to listen to their patients, because often a mother will come in and she knows what's wrong with her baby.
Yeah.
And so you can't let her out of the room until you've said, okay, this is the path we're going to use to figure out what's wrong, and I need your help in doing it. I need you to keep a diary. I need you to this. And I would just say to any of the mothers listening out there, if your pediatrician isn't paying attention, get a new one,
Yes.
because we are really professional observers and listeners. And I remember when the first year I was practicing medicine, I had an elderly pediatrician tell me, if a mom says something's wrong with her baby, you better start figuring it out before she leaves. And I'll never forget that, and I say that because I want mothers, when you feel in your gut something's off,
Yes.
something's off,
Yes.
say something. Don't
Yes.
keep doubting yourself. And
Yes.
if you need to go to your doctor and ask questions that you think are silly, ask questions that you think are silly, because none really are. And I think a lot of that, I could be wrong, Christina, you're the
Yeah.
you have all these panel, but I think a lot of it comes down to a lot of the negative tapes in our head. Well, how do I know?
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor. How do I know the low temperature is abnormal? Well, your gut is telling you something's wrong.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think that if I would love to hear what you say, but
Yeah.
encourage mothers in any way,
Yeah.
have the confidence to believe
Yes.
in your gut, and get rid of the stupid negative tapes that are hurting you and that are hurting your parenting.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
do you talk to mothers about that in your book?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, the inner critic, the negative self voices, the negative self talk is usually the
Terrible.
first thing we identify and try to work towards. And I think exactly what you're saying, that's exactly why we have Avocado Health, because you can text all those questions to Avocado Health and it will tell you, like, if this is an emergency. It will tell you that, good responses. And then you have a whole track record when you go to your pediatrician. Look, I've been worried that, my child's not latching. I've been noticing that they're not, they don't seem to be weighing enough. You have a track record of all the concerns you have that you can show your doctor, and you can get a summary, and you can kind of all those little questions that you don't want to call the doctor, you don't want to call the nurse for the 10th time. You just want to feel confident that you're doing the right thing. That's what we're trying to help with, right?
Well, and I would encourage parents too. I think that that's why a place like Avocado Health is so important, because we need resources we can trust.
Yes.
And a lot of times mothers will now go to Chat GPT or they'll Google something. Don't do that, because you're going to get so many answers that are going to completely confuse you.
Yes.
And your child with a migraine headache probably doesn't have a brain tumor. So go to a place I hear you. A lot of mothers will come in and I look at them and I tell them, oh, it's just it's a headache from a fever. And I know they're thinking more. And I will just say, it isn't a brain tumor. Just tell them, because I know they're worrying about that. Christina, this has been wonderful. So how can people find you and reach out to you if they're listening to this and they say, oh, I need that. I need Christina's voice. Where can people find you and find your resources?
Absolutely. So pretty simple. Everyone can go to avocadohealth.ai and sign up. You get 7 free days, trial it out. And we do have like daily messages that go out with the coaching component and reflection for parents. Like, what are the values you want to have as a parent? How you feel like you're doing as a parent. And you can email me directly. It's Christina, but without the H, Cristina, the Spanish spelling. So Cristina @avocadohealth.ai. And yes, we have the free weekly workshop. So join. We have amazing experts as well. We have our own podcast too. So I'd love to get you on there one time too.
You have everything. You have everything. I mean,
one-stop shop.
You really did pour your grief and your pain into something wonderful. And
so
I think that's extraordinary. My guest has been Christina Bernardo, and she is head of Avocado Health, which she started after a devastating loss of her daughter, Aviva, in 2020. She's coached lots and lots of women. So if you're a mother or a father listening to our podcast here and you have concerns, or maybe you don't even have concerns, you just want to learn how to be a better parent, don't go everywhere. Go to avocadohealth.ai to get the answers that you can really trust. Christina, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Meeker. I so appreciate it. It's been amazing.